Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Kent. I'm Reverend Stephen, minister of this congregation. Thank you for joining us this morning as we gather once again, a spiritual community that seeks to be diverse and inclusive as we inspire love, work for justice, and grow together in community. Once again, welcome. Now, as we prepare for worship, let us take just a moment to breathe together, to be fully present, to invite the Spirit to be present among us, and to learn from our Unitarian Universalist history as we seek to become more inclusive, diverse, and work for racial justice. Come, let us worship together.
Learning that our denomination's struggle for racial justice is nothing new, and it has been rather spotty in places. The Eighth Principle website tells us that Unitarian Universalists have done very good work in fighting racism, especially during the Civil Rights Movement. Many of our members and the UUA took direct action in the struggle for equal access and dignity. In the 1990s, the denomination, and later our congregation, worked on becoming an anti-racist, anti-oppression, multicultural organization, and passed a resolution to that effect at General Assembly in 1997. But the funding and support started to wane in the 2000s. UUs also have a mixed record historically in other areas of racial justice. For example, we had people on both sides of abolitionism, including people like Thomas Jefferson, who was a slaveholder. Unitarians, who were largely from the European American elite, often did not treat Native American peoples well. Some benefited from slavery, and some were leaders in the eugenics movement that promoted birth control for people of color because they were seen as inferior. Today's service is an opportunity to examine our history and how we have worked on, but not fully lived up to yet, our vision to be truly diverse and inclusive. We join Unitarian Universalists across the country in lighting our chalice, an invitation to continue our ongoing search for the light of truth within us and among us, a light to guide us on our journey as a community toward freedom, and a symbol of the love that burns within every heart. As we light our shared chalice, I invite you to light your home chalice. Please join in the words for lighting the chalice, which have been adapted from the Reverend Rebecca Savage. I invite you to respond with the words, "for all." Why do we light this chalice?
Because we are a beloved people, united in love and seeking justice.
What does this chalice symbolize?
It is a symbol of audacious hope. It shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly toward our highest ideals.
What do we hope this light will do?
Ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. One of the best gifts we can give ourselves in our busy lives and in these challenging times is time to care for our spiritual lives. Each week we create a time of shared stillness for prayer, reflection, gratitude, meditation, or simply being. This is in order to remember who we truly are, to reflect on life, and to reconnect with the sacred mystery that is the very heart of life itself. Let's enter stillness. Life is a mystery that brings many things. Part of our experience is struggle and loss. In the spirit of being a community of compassion and care, we take time now to share those sorrows, struggles, and losses that are in our hearts. If you have a sorrow, loss, or struggle to share, please use the chat box. I'll read these out loud. Let us hold our world in our hearts, especially with the threat of invasion and war. Let's pray for peace. Jenny Horvath is mourning the passing of a former colleague who died this week and has concerns for Brooke's mom, who was hospitalized. Jenny, we hold you in our hearts as you grieve, and send wishes for good health to Brooke's mother. Vivian Sandlin shares that UU singer-songwriter Mindy Simmons died on Friday from an aggressive cancer. Now to enter into a spirit of reflection and of prayer with these words adapted from Anthony P. Johnson. We have heard the words of the people we share life's journey with, the people who have placed their losses and sorrows and struggles before this community and before the holy. The words spoken are words of love and trust. Love for those whose names have been spoken, and love for those who hear. Love for those who care, and love for those who hold us in heart and mind. Trust in the acceptance of this community, and trust in the continuity and possibilities of life. Trust in the love that holds us close and never will let us go. Where there is loss, we offer gratitude for the gift of life. Where there is death, we trust that life somehow goes on. Where there is sorrow, we trust that comfort can be found. Where there is struggle, we trust that strength is possible and hope abounds. May we always live in trust and in love that all sorrow will be comforted and that all joy might be known and shared. May it be so. In the spirit of sharing joy, we've experienced moments this week that have lifted our spirits. Please use the chat box to share your joys with us. The Kemmerleys are grateful to have all three kids, Justin, Kate, and Connor, under the same roof to hang out this weekend. Hope you're having a lot of fun. Jenny Horvath is celebrating the birth of a new grandnephew. Congratulations, Jenny. Trudy Deal, joy for our new staff and gratitude to our leadership. I share that joy and gratitude. Claudia Miller says, joy for the Summit County Historical presentation yesterday on the history of Black leadership in Akron, Ohio. Swanee Venitis says, I'm looking forward to my granddaughter Allison's orchestra concert at Michigan. Andrew Weeby says, I had a great time with friends yesterday on the Kent Chocolate Walk yesterday. Despite the cold, maybe next year Hobbs Hall will be a stop. Now that's an idea I like. Of course, I wouldn't object to every Saturday being a chocolate walk, personally. Katie says, I'm excited about my new job with our church and excited to help us grow as the new campus youth manager. We're excited as well. Welcome, Katie. We're glad to have you as part of the staff. And now, with gratitude for these and every blessing we receive in life, for the gift of life itself, for the companionship of each other on life's journey, for the beauty of our world, and for this day of possibility, let us raise our hearts in gladness as we say together, Amen. For our time for all ages today, I want to talk to everyone about a reality. We live in a world where there are many different cultures, which are ways of being. Those of us who are white have certain ways we do things. People of other cultures have certain ways they do things. Maybe you've enjoyed food from another culture. Thai food is one of my favorites, or movies, or festivals. Since our church is mostly white people, we do things a certain way. We don't even realize it's because that's the way we've seen things done. But sometimes people of color don't feel welcome or included because of the idea we sometimes have that our way is the best way. This is what we call white supremacy, and it's something that keeps people of color from feeling like they belong. It's something that we as Unitarian Universalists want to change so that people of color can be part of our churches. Our white culture isn't bad or wrong, but it's not the only way we can do things. So I want to share a video of some testimonials from UU children and youth of color about their experiences in our churches. This video is from the curriculum, Mending the Broken Chalice.
Hi, so my name is Carrie Gottfried, and I am a junior in high school. I go to the UU Fellowship of Corvallis, which is in Oregon.
My name's Johnny, and I go to UU.
I'm Julian, and I also go to First Unitarian Society of Denver.
What is white supremacy?
The idea that people with white skin are better than people with like brown skin or black skin.
White supremacy is a kind of like a biased thought that some people have, where they think that white people have like they're better than other cultures or people.
I think it means that white people are thinking that black people don't have the same rights.
Have you ever experienced white supremacy or bias in our church?
I like it at church because I feel really safe there. When I need something to talk about, then I can talk at church because it makes me feel safe.
The UU faith in the community is a little bit different because we don't just think, oh yeah, white people are better. That's not something that we uphold. We want to respect everybody. But there are some times, because we live in America and there is inherent racism in America, sometimes there are parts of white supremacy and ideas that we think of that white people deserve to be in positions of power, that we don't say that, but that's something that comes from within us, and it sort of impacts how we live our lives.
Majority of us believe that like we're all, no matter what we come from, like we're all the same, we're human beings. But like there's like things like where some kids like they don't know what they like, it's just what they're taught. But like they understand like, you know, I have different hair, I have different skin tone, and like I'm not gonna say different, but they don't see it every day. So when they come to church and they see a couple kids who look like me, it's kind of different for them.
How does it make you feel?
It just feels like a tad bit weird for some reason, but I don't know why. I just feel that when I go in, but then after I stay there for a while, it doesn't feel weird anymore.
When I grew up, when I was a kid in my congregation, I had a different minister than who I have now, but all three ministers that I have been there when I was there have been white ministers. And my DRE is white, all of my advisors have been white. And what that does for me as a youth of color growing up in my UU church, is I don't see myself in those positions. And I never really thought that I could be a minister because I never saw somebody like me up there giving their sermon on a Sunday morning. I wasn't like, wow, I don't see anybody like me, but it was a part of how I internalized my Sunday mornings. I would go to church and it would be great, but there weren't people who could identify with the experience that I was going through as somebody who is mixed, as someone who's a person of color growing up in my faith. And it sort of made me feel icky inside, just this feeling of not quite fitting in, but wanting to fit in.
I've really been going to church lately because, like, honestly, it's kind of easier being with people that are like you and like look like you. Well, like our church is not very diverse, so it's just kind of hard fitting into a different group of people. At our church, I don't really talk a whole lot, but when I went to like church with more people like me, I was able to talk more and I just felt more comfortable like in my environment. It's hard to help someone if people don't know like how it is to live a daily life in other cultures or people.
So imagine coming to church or to religious education and not seeing others who are like you. How would you feel? Can you remember a time when a friend made you feel included? And have you ever done something to make sure someone else felt included? I'll be telling some stories today about how Unitarians and Universalists, and then Unitarian Universalists, have not always made sure people of color felt welcome or included. It's important to change that, and it's work we can all do together so that our churches are places where everyone is truly welcome and where everyone's ideas and ways of doing things can be included. That will begin to help heal our world and make it a better place. So like Colleen always does, I'm going to leave you with a question. I wonder, what can we do to make our churches more welcoming for others who are not like us?
Our first reading is an excerpt from The Healing is Not Done by Rebecca Savage. I play this moment over and over again in my head. The day I heard of the Thomas Jefferson Ball, hosted by Unitarian Universalists in 1993. As a person of color, raised in a UU congregation, I felt a shiver down my spine as I learned something new and unsettling about the faith that I call home. You may be wondering why this gathering of UUs in 1993 struck me as a profoundly memorable and painful moment. This is why. Attendees were encouraged to wear period clothes to the ball to celebrate Thomas Jefferson, who attended Unitarian churches. In the spirit of welcome, those who conceived of this social gathering did not take into account the centering of whiteness by asking people to attend in period dress. The organizers forgot or ignored the fact that in Jefferson's time, we black and brown UUs would have been slaves, property that was traded and sold, brutalized and subjected. I ask myself, what would I wear? Would I be a house slave, favored for my lighter skin and good hair? Would I have had shoes on my work-worn feet? Would I sing to myself faithful, mournful songs of liberation, dreaming for the day when I can taste freedom for myself and my family? Why do I raise this deeply wounding moment in our shared UU history? Because this isn't just a reflection about my lived experience as a person of color in a majority white denomination. This is also part of the story of how people of color experience sharing worship and community within our faith. We see this in considering that people of color have been part of our living tradition for centuries, but our voices have been overlooked, silenced, or outright rejected with hostility. I ignite my flame of justice and shine a light on this scar because the healing is not done. The healing is not done because we are still called to do the work of dismantling white supremacy culture and decentering whiteness from our bones, from our congregations, from the ways in which we interact and support one another. Beloveds, now is our time to lead with love and make right the ways our denomination has fallen short of our shared principles. We are a powerful, aspirational, covenanted people, and we are being called to account for our historic, moral, and spiritual failings in order to move into authentic, beloved community.
Recently, I asked someone, who are some of the heroes of our long Unitarian and Universalist history? Some of the names that came up were Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry Thoreau, William Channing. And if we're really versed, we can name a woman or two such as Olympia Brown, Susan B. Anthony, or Clara Barton. All white people. Why can't we name Unitarians or Universalists of color from our history? Because, as Reverend Rebecca Savage says, people of color have been a part of our living tradition for centuries, but our voices have been overlooked, silenced, or outright rejected with hostility. Today, I'm going to tell some stories from the book Darkening the Doorways, Black Trailblazers and Missed Opportunities in Unitarian Universalism by the Reverend Mark Morrison Reed. In 1860, the American Unitarian Association held its annual fall convention in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Much of the 3 days, ironically enough, was dedicated to discussing how Unitarianism could be welcoming to more people. On the last day of the convention, the Reverend William Jackson, minister of a local Baptist congregation, addressed the convention. He declared his conversion to Unitarianism and then asked for help for his congregation, which was in debt. He received a generous sum of money, but no encouragement. Historian Douglas Stang wrote, "The Unitarians took a collection and Mr. Jackson was sent on his way. No discussion, no welcome, no expression of praise and satisfaction was uttered that the Unitarian gospel had reached African Americans." William Jackson did not become a Unitarian, but continued to serve as a Baptist minister. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, born in 1825 to free black parents in the slave state of Maryland, was one of the first black women to make a living from her published writings. Her passion for social justice was lived out in abolitionism, suffrage, temperance, as well as the black literary movement, children's rights, and women's movements. Harper belonged to both the Philadelphia Bethel AME Church and First Unitarian Church, although she didn't write about her relationship to Unitarianism. She once said, "We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul." In spite of her prolific work, she is not well known among UUs, nor is a single word she wrote in our hymnal or our readings. The other Unitarian story I want to tell this morning is that of the Reverend Egbert Ethelbread Brown, born in Jamaica in 1875. He attended the Meadville Theological School from 1910 to 1912, was ordained, and returned to Jamaica to serve as a Unitarian missionary. He is considered the first black Unitarian minister to be admitted to fellowship. He later emigrated to New York City, that was in 1920, and founded the Harlem Unitarian Church, which was a center of radicalism. The American Unitarian Association's leaders, who were annoyed by Brown's ongoing requests for support, viewed him as such a nuisance that after a number of attempts, they finally managed to drop him from fellowship in 1929. Two presidents of the AUA, Samuel Eliot and Lewis Cornish, thought African Americans were, quote, "of the lower classless and shiftless rascals," argued that it was an impertinence to spread Unitarianism to them. Ethelbread Brown's AUA fellowship was reinstated in 1935 by threatening legal action with the support of the American Civil Liberties Union and a very shrewd lawyer. In 1947, Brown wrote of his dream that in the not distant future, our Unitarian churches will be genuinely interracial, and I mean in their pulpits as well as in their pews. In spite of its radical and egalitarian message that humanity was one great family and that all people would be saved, Universalism never really did take hold in African American communities. Theories point to Universalism's inability to answer the difficult questions of how a loving God could allow black slavery and suffering. Some African Americans did become Universalists. Gloucester Dalton, a man who came to America as a slave, was among the founders of the Gloucester Universalist Society in 1785. In 1801, Amy Scott, a black woman, was among those who organized the first Universalist Society in Philadelphia. Joseph Jordan was the first African American to be ordained as a Universalist minister. He was born as a free person in 1842, and was originally ordained a Baptist minister. But after reading Thomas Whitmore's book, The Plain Guide to Universalism, he traveled to Philadelphia to study with the Reverend Edwin Sweetser, a Universalist minister. When he returned to Norfolk, Jordan began to preach Universalism and helped organize a congregation in 1887. He was ordained in 1889, and his congregation was soon admitted to the Universalist General Convention. Annie B. Willis was the daughter of Universalist minister Joseph Fletcher Jordan and Mary J. Jordan. In 1904, Annie's family settled in St. Paul's Universalist Church and Mission School in Suffolk, Virginia, where Thomas Wise, another Black Universalist minister, had just abandoned due to a lack of support from the Universalist Convention. The school became Joseph and Mary's life work and eventually Annie's. In 1917, the school began to receive support from the Universalist General Convention as a living model for racial understanding and respect. When her father died in 1929, Annie became principal of the school, which offered kindergarten through 9th grade. When the Unitarians and Universalists consolidated in 1961, support for the school, which had come from the Universalist Service Committee and then the UU Service Committee, continued to decline. The school was reduced to just a kindergarten by 1969 and closed in 1984 after 87 years of serving the Black population of Suffolk. Annie retired in 1974 and then died in 1977, another Black trailblazer of Unitarian Universalism, all but forgotten. There are many other Black Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists who throughout the history of our denomination sometimes managed to find a place for themselves, but often not without struggle. In 1956, 80 out of 287 congregations had African American members, and African Americans were active as officers in 49 congregations. In 1958, the Reverend David H. Eaton approached AUA President Dana Greeley and was told, "I'd love to have you, but we'll have trouble settling you." Eaton would later be called to All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. In 1968, there were 8 African American ministers and about 1,500 African American congregation members. It wasn't until 1981 that the first African American woman, the Reverend Yvonne Chappell-Sion, was granted ministerial fellowship. In 2001, the Reverend William Sinkford was elected the first African American president of the UUA. As of 2001, the UUA had 26 African American ministers. Today, there are well over 100, but that's a mere 6% of our ministers. Our denomination's story includes many moments where it's seen the goal of inclusivity and diversity would happen, including General Assembly resolutions, an institutional racism audit, adult RE curricula, and the creation of an Office of Racial and Cultural Diversity. In spite of these efforts, people of color continue to be pushed away, from the Thomas Jefferson Ball to religious professionals and volunteer leaders of color who are not able to share their gifts without fears of retaliation, nor live the fullness of their vocation and calling. The UUA Commission on Institutional Change wrote that, theologically, Unitarian Universalism is uniquely positioned to answer the call among us for a new kind of faith, which would serve the needs of our communities, including advocacy and support for those most targeted by the politics of hate. Yet the systemic racism, patriarchy, and other forms of oppression among us make it impossible for us to answer this call without new commitments, accountabilities, and visions for change. The committee concludes by saying, these forces also deny access to our faith to those people of color who are attracted by our theological traditions and repelled by our culture. We are still seeking a way to be truly diverse and to be a spiritual home for people of color. I tell these stories today not to create feelings of guilt or shame, but to open our eyes to the truth that our denomination has fallen short of its ideals and that there is deep spiritual and institutional work to be done. The 8th principle, which we will learn about more next Sunday, is an opportunity for Unitarian Universalism to live up to its vision to be a truly anti-racist, multicultural institution. Together, may we make that so. Now I invite Heidi, our worship associate this morning, to to share part of the poem On the Pulse of Mourning by Maya Angelou, to inspire us to continue working for the dream of a truly inclusive and diverse Unitarian Universalism that will bring our world closer to the dream of beloved community.
History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, and if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream, women, children, men, all. Take it into the palm of your hands. Mold it into the shape of your most private need. Sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Hold, each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. Do not be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change. I invite us into a few moments of silent reflection.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and it is from this we live. Our spiritual community thrives in its shared life of worship, community, and ministry, as each of us participates in the circle of giving and receiving. This is possible due to your generous gifts of money, time, and care for each other, and the recognition that we are truly all interconnected. Thank you. To help others in our community thrive, we also give to agencies and organizations in Kent and beyond that serve those in need. February's special offering is for the Anti-Defamation League, ADL of Cleveland. The ADL is a leading anti-hate organization founded in 1913 to respond to an escalating climate of anti-Semitism and bigotry. It is a global leader in exposing extremism, delivering anti-bias education, and fighting hate online. The ADL's ultimate goal is a world in which no group or individual suffers from bias, discrimination, or hate. In the spirit of gratitude for the gift of one another in this community and for the abundance that makes our generosity possible, we now give and receive the offering as a sign of our shared commitment to the life and work of this congregation and beyond. Thank you, Vanessa, for selecting music by Black composers to feature this morning. Now to bring our time of worship to its close, would you join me in extinguishing the chalice? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. May we carry these in our hearts and minds until we are together again. I invite you now to join in singing our closing hymn, We Shall Overcome. Now I offer you these words by Kimberly Quinn Johnson and from June Jordan's poem for South American women. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fitted for this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our past as we chart a new future. We are the ones we have been waiting for. May we be bold and courageous to chart that new future. May we have faith in a future that is not known. We are the ones we have been waiting for. And now, with faith in a future that is not known, but hearing the call to work for racial justice and knowing that we are the ones we have been waiting for, let us go forth in hope and possibility as we continue inspiring love, seeking justice, and growing together in community. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen. And I honor the divine light in you.